In the summer of 1941, Nazi Germany already dominated Western Europe. To the east, Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin maintained an unlikely alliance under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. They were actively carving up Poland, with the Soviet Union supplying Germany with the grain and oil needed to fuel the Nazi war machine. That cooperation shattered on the morning of June 22nd. Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, hurling over 3 million men and 3,000 tanks across the Soviet border. It was the largest single land invasion in history. The German High Command anticipated a swift victory, planning for a campaign lasting only 4 to 6 weeks. Their objectives were absolute: seize Caucasian oil, secure living space for the Reich, and eradicate communism through a ruthless war of annihilation. The opening weeks moved with lethal efficiency. German armored divisions sliced through Soviet territory, surrounding hundreds of thousands of troops. To the watching world, the Soviet Union appeared to be on the brink of collapse. However, this seemingly unstoppable force was already carrying the seeds of its own destruction. Nazi racial ideology dictated the entire strategic framework of the invasion. The German High Command viewed the Soviet Union as a subhuman behemoth with feet of clay, believing that a single violent impact would cause the entire state to instantly crumble. This arrogance led to a total disregard for the realities of Soviet geography. While the spearhead relied on modern tanks, the bulk of the German logistics network was powered by hundreds of thousands of horse-drawn wagons. These units struggled to supply a front line moving faster than their legs could carry them. The certainty of a quick victory resulted in a massive oversight in military history. The German military apparatus deliberately chose not to equip its soldiers with winter clothing, assuming the campaign would be over long before the first frost. Staggering victories in the early months, resulting in millions of captured Soviet troops, only masked these structural failures. The Blitzkrieg was succeeding on the map, but it was operating on a logistical foundation built on racial delusion rather than military reality. Hitler suspended martial law through the Commissar Order, mandating the execution of captured Soviet political officers. This ideology of extermination led to the deliberate starvation of millions of regular prisoners of war. This brutality had unintended strategic consequences. Once Red Army soldiers realized surrender meant guaranteed death, they began to fight with the desperation of men with nothing left to lose. Instead of breaking Soviet morale, Nazi atrocities hardened it. Stalin reinforced this resolve with his own ruthless measures by publicly executing fleeing deserters and demanding total national defense. Soviet soldiers were trapped between two lethal forces, leaving them with no choice but to hold their ground at any cost. By framing the invasion as a war of annihilation, Hitler forged an unbreakable resistance. What was intended as a lightning conquest rapidly transformed into a brutal, multi-year struggle of attrition. By August 1941, the German spearhead was 200 miles from Moscow. Hitler halted the drive, diverting his panzers south toward Kiev. The delay was costly. When they pivoted back in October, autumn rains turned Russian roads into mud, stalling the advance and breaking supply lines. Then winter arrived. Lacking heavy uniforms, the German army literally froze in tracks. Men and equipment failed just 19 miles from the Soviet capital. At this moment of peak vulnerability, the Soviet Union launched a massive counterattack. Reinforced by winter-hardened troops from Siberia, they deployed a weapon the Germans were unprepared for, the T-34 tank. navigating the snow and mud with ease. As the German lines fell back from Moscow, the prospects for a quick victory vanished. The Wehrmacht was now forced into a defensive posture, caught in the prolonged war of attrition that Hitler's logistics had never been designed to support. In 1942, Hitler launched a new offensive to secure Caucasian oil. Simultaneously, his ego demanded the capture of Stalingrad, the city bearing his rival's name. This decision split his forces, dangerously overextending his already exhausted Sixth Army. Inside the city, the battle became a house-to-house struggle through frozen ruins. This urban warfare bled the German forces dry, pinning them down while the Red Army prepared a massive pincer movement. The subsequent Soviet encirclement trapped over 300,000 Axis troops. After months of starvation and bitter cold, the Sixth Army was forced into a humiliating surrender, marking a catastrophic loss of manpower that Germany could never replace. 1 year later, at the Battle of Kursk, the German army made its final attempt to regain the initiative. Despite deploying massive new Tiger and Panther tanks, they were met by a Soviet defense that had become the most sophisticated in the world. The failure at Kursk shattered Germany's offensive capability. The industrial scale and bottomless manpower of the Soviet Union were physically crushing the German military machine. The Eastern Front became the bloodiest conflict in human history, a theater of war that ultimately determined the outcome of World War II. While the Russian winter was lethal, the German collapse began in the planning rooms months before the first snow fell. The campaign's objectives were anchored in racial ideology, leaving the High Command unprepared for the actual scale of the conflict. Nazi doctrine's rigid classification of the Soviets as an inferior race blinded the German leadership to the reality of their opponent. This prejudice obscured the scale of Soviet resilience and an industrial machine that was already outproducing the German Reich. The industrial scale and resilience of the Soviet Union dismantled Hitler's empire, but the foundation for that defeat was laid by his own profound hubris. When military strategy is dictated by ideological arrogance, it ultimately ensures its own destruction.